conference of the Soil Association, and they are people, of course, you know, who take the production of food very seriously. They say that, well, food should be, you know, organic, it should be produced, you know, without the use of pesticides. But by and large, they're not vegetarian. Some of them are, but most of them are not. And I was invited to present to them the whole concept of protecting cows, which we practice at the manor. We have a dairy herd there of 50 animals who are not slaughtered. And the secret is, of course, if you want to have cruelty-free dairy food, the whole question arises, well, what are you going to do with the 50% of calves that are bulls? Because you can't milk a bull, right? So, you know, do you just put them in the field and feed them until they die and it just becomes an expense? The answer is no. You engage the bulls in working, because bulls they like to work. We all like to work. Everyone wants to have something useful to do. And so at Bhaktivedanta Manor, some of you will have been there and seen, we have a working dairy farm, and the farm is powered by oxen. All the things that a tractor would normally do are done by the oxen. And there is one full-on bull, you know, who hasn't been done, because you normally, of course, traditionally, an oxen is a bull who's been gelded, is the traditional word for it. So he becomes easier to work with. And actually they grow bigger, they get very strong and placid. But we do have one actual bull at the manor who is, you know, does the procreation, not all of it, but most of it. And his name is Karmadev. Karmadev, it means the god of love. Yeah, so that's what he's called. But no, the bulls, therefore, they're not killed because they're very useful. And Shamsundar, who's the chief farmer there, he says that actually when a new calf is born, I want it to be a bull because they're so useful. Ploughing the fields, bringing in the hay, you know, carrying loads here and there, and they're a wonderful sight to behold. So in fact, a year ago, I published a book about all of that, called Cows and the Earth. And to launch the book, we arranged to bring a pair of oxen from the manor down to the South Bank. You know, the Royal Festival Hall, I happened to have a contact there who knew the director of the Royal Festival Hall, so we asked her, could we bring our oxen onto your veranda, which overlooks the Thames, because that seemed like it would be a good spot for a photo opportunity. So we had these two enormous oxen standing there so placidly, you know, they had all the time in the world just standing there, chewing away, and attracted such a crowd. They were a bit like, I remember I had a friend, we never had dogs, but I had a friend who had a golden Labrador, you know, when we were little children. And you know, a golden Labrador is such a placid animal, you can do anything with a golden Labrador, they'll never get upset. So they were like that, the same nature, I felt, these enormous creatures. So as part of producing that book, I was invited to the Soil Association to talk about it. And during the talk, somehow I showed some slides, and there was just something that just kind of slipped out. I just said, without thinking too much about it, but I said that if the way you produce your food is violent to nature, and I said, I'm not just talking about, you know, being vegetarian, but just in general, if it's violent to nature, then how can we ever have peace? I just said that. But apparently this, you know, it caused quite a stir. A lot of people thought about that, and one woman who had a farm came up to me afterwards. She said, I have a beef farm. Although she was actually a very conscientious person, she cared about her animals, but she said, I have a beef farm. But after that, now, I have to change everything. So it was a big crisis for her, and I've since heard she sold her farm. But in fact, it is possible for food to be produced without violence. And that's really what Krishna is calling for in the Bhagavad Gita. Not just that, but that you offer your food to me as an act of devotion. And that, he says in the Gita, whereas food which is produced without that consciousness of offering, it will bind you to the cycle of birth and death. So in actual fact, Krishna uses quite strong language. He says, you will be eating sin, eating karma that will bind you. Whereas, if you offer the food to Krishna, make it as a sacrifice, then that same act of eating is releasing you from karma. So here Narada says that I took the remnants of their food, and as a result, all my sins were at once eradicated. And so being engaged, I became purified in heart, he says. At that time, very interesting, he says, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. So what happened was, he's a young boy. He's only 5 years old, actually. He's not thinking about philosophy. But he associates with these devotees. And in fact, the name that the Bhagavatam gives them is a really amazing clue for us. They're called, in the Bhagavatam, they're called Bhakti Vedantas. Bhakti Vedanta means devotion, bhakti, and Vedanta, knowledge. So they're called Bhakti Vedantas, and Narada's experience was that just as a young child, without really hearing anything they said or having any sort of interaction with them, other than to serve them and to taste the food, once only from their plate, his life was changed. And the nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to him. So I was reflecting on this, and of course it's not an accident that Prabhupada, who started this movement, when he took sannyas, when I think he was around about 60, he took sannyas, and his godbrothers conferred upon him the name Bhakti Vedanta. Actually, he was given the name Swami. That was his sannyas name, so he was called Swami Maharaj. But some of his godbrothers said, no, we should call him Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj. So they must have been thinking of this passage, because somehow they foresaw that he, would have a powerful influence through his association. And that was the way that the Krishna consciousness movement really began. It was young boys and girls, really, mostly late teens, early 20s, meeting Prabhupada without really knowing anything too much about what he stood for. And just by his association, maybe, Prabhupada always made a point of giving prasadam. Anyone who would come and visit him, he always insisted they had to receive something to eat from his hand, some prasad, it's called mercy of Krishna, something to eat. So by associating with him, hearing him, and tasting a little food, a change happened, and this change, the beginning of this change is the nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. I would like to be like that. That's what we need in life, is we need, all of us need, role models. Someone who is actually enacting that state of life where what I'm doing is I'm doing it for the sake of Krishna, for the sake of God.